Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to go deep into forensic psychology. We've got Kerry Daynes' memoir, 20 years working with some of society's, well, most complex individuals.
We'll be looking at the minds of offenders, of course. But also, all the systems, the biases we run into in mental health, criminal justice, that sort of thing.
I was hooked right away, that story about Maurice.
Oh, yeah.
Secure hospital unit.
Maurice.
Using his glass eye.
Oh, to freak people out.
To elicit fear and disgust.
Okay.
And it directly connected to his offenses.
Offense paralleling. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It suggests offenders might unconsciously reenact elements of their crimes, in different contexts. Like Maurice, he used that glass eye, right?
Yeah.
To control people, to exert this disturbing control, just like he did in his offenses.
Chilling. I mean, she talks about having to push the eyeball aside.
Oh, wow.
And keep drinking her soup just to keep it together.
That image, though, it really captures the mental discipline this field demands. Imagine working with someone who's done horrific things, but you have to maintain a degree of, detachment to even begin to understand their motivations.
You start to question everything you thought you knew about criminals.
Right.
Right. Like we have these images, these preconceived notions, what they look like, how they should behave.
Daynes really challenges that from the start. She talks about these internalized profiles we carry around, the negative relief to us, the good ones. But honestly, the line between us and them, much blurrier than we like to admit.
Then she takes us to HMP Wakefield, high-security prison.
Ah, yes.
Known for its challenging environment.
Yeah.
What a contrast.
Talk about a baptism by fire. Not only does she have to navigate, that whole complex prison environment, but she also faced sexism, harassment.
Oh, from colleagues?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Underlines these systemic issues that exist.
Imagine. Young female psychologist.
Yeah.
Surrounded by men who've committed some of the most serious crimes.
Right.
And then facing hostility from your own colleagues.
It is a stark reminder that the criminal justice system, it's not immune to those same biases and prejudices that we see everywhere.
They gave her this research project, interviewing inmates convicted of murder, rape, sexual assault.
Talk about being thrown in the deep end.
I know, right?
But those interviews, they were really powerful. She had to confront not just the realities of those crimes, but the attitudes, beliefs of the people who committed them.
That story about Patrick really stayed with me.
Oh, yeah.
The man disfigured in a fire, started by his former employer.
Right.
Such a heart-wrenching case.
It raises so many questions. Victimhood, trauma, revenge. Here's a man who went through this horrific ordeal. His life, irrevocably changed. But instead of support, justice, what happens? He attacks the very person who caused his suffering. You can see how that trauma led him down this destructive path.
Makes you think about how we, as a society, deal with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing enough to support victims, to address those root causes of violence?
That's a question that Daynes grapples with, throughout the book. And she doesn't give easy answers, but she definitely forces us to confront those uncomfortable truths.
Then there's Allison.
Right.
Killed her abusive partner.
Right.
This case dives into the cycle
Yeah.
of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
The challenges victims face.
Daynes, she has personal experience with an abusive relationship, gives her this incredible insight. She understands it's not just about, just leaving. It's the psychological manipulation, the control abusers exert. It makes escape incredibly difficult.
That phrase she uses, spinning wheel of violence and shock.
Yes.
That intense dynamic.
Yeah, it's not just about physical violence. It's about that constant fear, that erosion of self-esteem, feeling trapped. Daynes really highlights these complexities that the legal system often just, doesn't grasp.
It's frustrating when the people who are supposed to help, they just don't get it.
The case of Allison, it shows how the justice system can fail to protect victims of abuse. It challenges us to look beyond, the surface, to understand those deeper psychological dynamics at play.
Okay, then we meet Travis, suspected of faking mental illness to avoid prison.
Yes.
Things get really interesting here.
Malingering, feigning illness for personal gain. It's fascinating. Travis was a master manipulator, exploiting the system. He even fooled, experienced clinicians for a while.
How can you tell when someone's truly suffering versus putting on an act?
That's the challenge, isn't it? They have to be so perceptive, looking for those subtle cues, inconsistencies, to try and determine the truth. And then there's the ethical dilemmas. Misdiagnosis can have serious consequences.
Daynes emphasizes, though, that malingering, it exists, but not as common as people might think.
That's right. It's important to remember that most people who claim to be mentally ill, they are genuinely struggling. We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. Approach these cases with, healthy skepticism, but also compassion.
The story of Market.
Yes.
The man who killed his brother during a schizophrenic episode.
Right.
Really highlights the stigma surrounding mental illness.
What's powerful about Marcus's story is how it challenges us to see mental illness not as this separate category, but as part of that spectrum of human suffering. He was clearly in distress, driven by delusions, hallucinations.
Makes you think about the limits of diagnostic labels. Do they really capture the complexity of human experience?
That's something Daynes wrestles with throughout the book. And while diagnoses can be helpful, for understanding, treating mental illness, they can also be, overly simplistic, to stigma.
Remember what Marcus said in that group therapy session?
Oh, let me think.
He said, all this shit is pain. Just pain is all.
It's profound, isn't it? Cuts through all the medical jargon, gets to the heart of it. Behind the diagnosis, there's a human being in immense pain, challenges us to approach mental illness with empathy, understanding.
Marcus's story also reveals the racial biases that exist within the mental health system.
Yeah. Sadly, individuals from minority ethnic groups, they face disparities in treatment, access to care. It's a reminder that we need to address these systemic inequities to ensure everyone gets the support they need.
Let's shift gears a bit. Talk about Daynes' move into consultancy work with the police, specifically profiling.
This is where her expertise really comes through. She debunks those myths surrounding profiling, emphasizing that it's not about mystical intuition or anything. It's about applying psychological knowledge, analyzing the evidence.
That case of Hogan, the suspected serial offender.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating glimpse into police interrogation.
Hogan was so guarded, controlling his words, his actions. But Daynes, she could pick up on these subtle cues, the inconsistencies between what he said, how he behaved.
Like piecing together a puzzle.
Exactly.
Using her understanding of human behavior to uncover the truth.
Profiling is about looking for patterns, understanding motivations, using that knowledge to help solve crimes. It's a tool, can be incredibly valuable when used responsibly.
And there's Gary, serving an indeterminate sentence for public protection.
An IPP.
This really exposed some of the flaws in the system.
The IPP system, well-intentioned as it was, it had these serious unintended consequences. Gary's impulsive behavior, his inability to conform to prison norms, it kept him trapped in this cycle, punishment, despair. And Daynes began to question, were Gary's issues maybe stemming from physical health problems rather than purely psychological ones?
Mind and body.
Exactly. She uncovered a history of untreated childhood illness that, could have been contributing to his behavioral issues. It's a reminder that a holistic approach to understanding human behavior, crucial.
And sadly, Gary's story ends tragically.
His death, it underscores those systemic failures she'd been grappling with. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of these failures. And it fueled her desire to advocate for change.
Daynes doesn't just explore the lives of others, though, right? She shares her own experience of being stalked, cyberbullied.
Adds a whole other dimension.
Chilling account. It reveals how vulnerable we all are, especially in the online world. Hard to believe someone would target her like that. Knowing her background.
It's true.
This person created a whole website in her name.
Oh, wow.
Spreading lies, trying to damage her reputation.
It's a reminder that stalking, cyberbullying, these are forms of abuse. They have a devastating impact. It can happen to anyone, regardless of their profession or expertise.
The way she describes the stalker's behavior, how it escalated.
Oh, yeah.
It's unsettling. He even tried to extort money from her.
It shows we need to take all forms of harassment seriously. Online and offline, we need stronger legal protections for victims, greater awareness of the dangers.
It's such a contrast to the detached objectivity she cultivated in her professional life.
Here she is, an expert in criminal behavior, and suddenly she's the target. It goes to show that anyone can become a victim, no matter how knowledgeable, how experienced they are.
This experience, though, it deepened her commitment to advocating for change, not just within the criminal justice system, but in society as a whole. Each case, each experience, it seems like it just shaped her views in such profound ways.
That's what makes this, this deep dive so compelling. It's not just a collection of stories. It's a journey of personal and professional transformation.
And that brings us to Liam.
Okay.
A young man whose case, well, it brings together so many of the themes we've been talking about.
Right.
Profiling, risk assessment, the psychology of stalking. This guy was chilling.
Liam showed those classic predatory stalking behaviors. His actions, premeditated, calculated, driven by that desire for control, domination. Daynes' expertise in profiling, though, it was key in uncovering the true extent of his behavior.
Stark reminder that stalking can be a precursor to more serious violence.
Oh, absolutely.
And early intervention is crucial.
It's about recognizing those warning signs, taking stalking behavior seriously, taking steps to protect potential victims.
Also a reminder that violence against women, it's a pervasive issue, demands a multifaceted response.
We need to challenge those harmful societal norms, promote healthy relationships, hold perpetrators accountable, create a culture where women feel safe, supported.
Wow, this deep dive, already so packed with insights. And we haven't even touched on the second half of the book.
I know, there's so much more to uncover. Shocking acts of love, devotion, the complexities of delusion, the impact of trauma. The next part of our exploration, well, it's going to be just as thought-provoking.
Stay tuned. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into the world of forensic psychology through the eyes of Kerry Daynes. Back again for the deep dive. Last time, things got intense with some of those cases from Kerry Daynes' memoir.
Right.
We were in the minds of offenders, talking trauma, the whole criminal justice system.
We saw how she questioned what we even consider normal behavior, how our assumptions, sometimes they miss those complex realities of mental illness, criminality.
Ready for more? Today, we're going deeper. More thought-provoking stories, unexpected insights, all that.
Yeah.
Get ready to see the human mind, the world around you, a little differently.
We've got some truly compelling cases. We'll see love, delusion, the effects of trauma, really powerful stuff.
Okay, let's jump in. One of the most striking stories in the book, right?
Okay, yeah.
The woman who cut off her own finger
Oh, wow.
to smuggle it to her incarcerated partner.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what even?
It's an act that seems shocking, almost unbelievable. But if you look deeper into her motivations, there's this profound need for connection, desperate attempt to express love, loyalty, in an impossible situation.
It challenges how we think about healthy relationships. Her actions were extreme, sure, but driven by, like, a deep emotional bond.
It shows how vulnerable we are in relationships, especially when there's a power imbalance. Her willingness to go to such lengths, I mean, it's heartbreaking and thought-provoking for sure.
Makes you question those boundaries of normal behavior.
Right.
Even extreme actions can be understood, within a person's life, their psychology.
We see that again with Maya,
Yeah.
who believes she was in a relationship with a deceased doctor. Talk about a different reality.
I know, right? Like stepping into a world where reality is, well, blurred. How do you even begin to understand that?
I think it's crucial to recognize that delusions, even if they seem irrational, they often serve a purpose, a psychological function. Like with Maya, that imaginary relationship, it gave her comfort, stability in a world that felt chaotic to her, her way of coping with pain, with trauma.
So not just dismissing them as, crazy or meaningless.
Right, exactly. It's about understanding those underlying emotional needs.
And treating patients with delusions, I imagine that takes a lot of, balance.
It does, validating their experiences, yes, but also helping them find a more grounded sense of reality. Empathy, patience, those are key.
Meeting them where they are, rather than forcing them to, conform to what we think is real.
And this highlights a theme Daynes keeps coming back to: compassion. Understanding.
Yeah.
When we're facing human suffering, whether it's criminal behavior, mental illness, or just unconventional ways of coping.
Okay, now buckle up, because we're going into a whole other realm of complexity.
Right, what's next?
Jean, diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder.
D.
A condition that's so often misunderstood.
Controversial, even.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Jean's story, it takes us into the origins of DA, how it functions as a coping mechanism for extreme trauma. Her multiple identities, right? As confusing as they seem, it was her way of surviving unbearable pain.
Different aspects of herself, fragmented, compartmentalized, a defense against overwhelming trauma.
You wonder, were those different identities like protectors, shielding her from those traumatic experiences.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Daynes emphasizes how important it is to validate her experiences, recognize her struggles are real, even if they don't fit neatly into those traditional categories.
This is where Daynes' critique of the mental health system, it really comes through.
Oh, yeah.
Jean's behavior, her struggles to fit in, it was met with resistance. They tried to control her, not understand her.
Another example of how systems designed to help, sometimes they do more harm than good.
It's heartbreaking. We need to move beyond those rigid labels. Start seeing individuals, their unique experiences, their needs.
Jean's case, it's a call for a more, person-centered approach.
Yeah, I agree. More empathy, more understanding, respect for the individual's experience.
That's it.
Each case, each encounter, it seems like it chipped away at Daynes' faith in the systems, right?
Yeah.
Which brings us to her decision to step back from frontline forensic psychology.
20 years. Working within a system, seeing the flaws, the limitations, fighting for change. It's understandable why she felt burnt out, disillusioned.
It must have been a tough choice, though, walking away from a career after all that.
Not an easy decision, that's for sure. But she realized she could have more impact by changing her focus. Not working within the system, but advocating for change from the outside. She was ready to dedicate herself to something bigger, fighting for a more just, compassionate approach.
Not treating the symptoms, but addressing those root causes.
That's it. Realizing that these individual cases, they reflect bigger societal issues, and real change means addressing those underlying problems.
It's inspiring. Walking away from something that wasn't working, stepping outside that comfort zone, challenging things.
It shows that sometimes the best way to fight for change is to walk away from a broken system and dedicate yourself to building something better.
Before we move on, I want to touch on one more case. Daynes attending the trial of Mark Bridger.
Oh, yes.
The man who abducted and murdered April Jones. It shook everyone.
This had such a profound impact on her. Imagine being exposed to those horrific details. Seeing the pain, the devastation, it's a reminder of the darkest parts of humanity.
Even for someone who's worked with criminals, studied all that, it must have been hard to process.
It was a turning point. She was confronting the limits of her work. The frustration of seeing violence, abuse repeat itself. She started questioning her own role. What more could be done to prevent these tragedies?
A sobering reminder that even with knowledge, expertise, we can't always stop evil.
It also fueled her determination to make a difference, to advocate for a world where children are safe, protected.
Daynes' journey is, well, it's a roller coaster. She's seen it all.
Yeah.
And it shaped her views.
In the final part, we'll explore those views, what lessons we can learn from her experience.
All right, final part of our deep dive into Kerry Daynes' memoir. Times like, put it all together, what have we learned?
Right. We've been through some really tough cases, seen the complexity of human behavior, trauma, all the flaws in the systems. What does it all mean?
This book, it's not just stories, right? It's a call to action. It makes you question everything. Mental illness, criminality, how we function as a society.
She wants us to look beyond those simple labels, to see the humanity in everyone, and to really address the root causes of suffering, not just the symptom.
Trauma. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I'm taking away, how it impacts everything, not just the individual, families, communities, even entire systems.
Remember Patrick, disfigured in that fire, his story, it shows how trauma, when it's not dealt with, it can lead to more violence, more despair. You have to wonder how many others are caught in those cycles. Their pain, it ripples out through generations even.
We need to support victims of trauma.
Absolutely.
But also we need to address the root causes of violence. You can't just punish people without understanding, what led them there.
Exactly.
Another thing that really struck me, those rigid definitions of normal. Like, who decides what's normal?
Right.
We met that woman who cut off her finger. Maya, who thought she was in love with a dead doctor. It challenges everything.
It does.
And it makes you realize we're so quick to judge. But Daynes, she wants us to be curious, to have empathy.
There's always a deeper story, isn't there? A reason behind those actions, even when they seem completely irrational.
Understanding the context, the history, the psychological function of their behavior. It's a good reminder that everyone's on their own journey, shaped by things, experiences that we might never fully understand.
Right.
Daynes also shows us, the flaws, the unintended consequences of those systems we rely on. Criminal justice, mental health care.
Yeah.
Think about her time at HMP Wakefield or Kerry stuck in the IPP system. These systems, They're supposed to help, but sometimes they just make things worse.
They do. It's frustrating, isn't it?
So frustrating.
We have to remember those systems, they're made up of people with their own biases, their own limitations. We can't just accept things as they are. We need to keep asking questions, push for reform, demand better.
Daynes stepping back from that frontline work. It wasn't giving up. It was more like, okay, how can I make a real difference? And sometimes that means working from the outside, challenging the status quo.
Absolutely. It's inspiring. She could have stayed in that comfortable role, but she chose to do something harder, to speak out, to advocate for a more just world.
Her journey, it's been intense,
Yeah.
challenging, heartbreaking at times. But she found her purpose.
She did. And it reminds us that even when things are dark, there's always hope. We can learn, we can question, we can fight for a better future.
Okay, before we wrap things up, you've been taking those notes, right? What are the key takeaways, like the top 10 things our listeners should remember from this deep dive?
Okay, top 10. Here we go. Trauma, it has a ripple effect. It impacts everything, individuals, systems, society as a whole. Number 2, we need to look beyond those labels, see the humanity in everyone, even those who've done terrible things. 3, there's always a deeper story, a reason behind those actions, even when they seem irrational. Number 4, systems, even those designed to help, they can actually perpetuate harm. We have to demand better. 5, question those assumptions about normal. Approach things with curiosity, empathy. Number 6, compassion, understanding. These are crucial when we're dealing with mental illness, criminal behavior, all of it. 7, personal experiences. They can be catalysts for change. They shape how we see the world, drive us to fight for something better. 8, it's okay to step outside that comfort zone, to challenge things, even if it means leaving behind what's familiar. Number 9, there's always hope. Even in the darkest times, we can choose how we respond. We can work towards a brighter future. And finally, number 10, this book, it's a call to action. It's about looking deeper, questioning everything, and working towards a more just, more compassionate world.
Wow, that's powerful. Really sums it all up.
Daynes' insights, the power of her story, it's remarkable.
It's been an incredible journey. I hope our listeners feeling inspired to keep learning, keep questioning, to be part of that change.
Me too.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep exploring.